Have you ever wondered how Islam found its way into the heart of China? How did a faith that began in the deserts of Arabia end up shaping the lives of millions in a land known for its ancient traditions, imperial dynasties, and strict governance? The journey of Islam in China is one of resilience, adaptation, and struggle, a story of traders, travelers, and entire communities that carved out an existence despite immense challenges. As we embark on this journey through time, you'll discover not just the golden age of Islam in China, but also the hardships its followers face today. Stay with me as we uncover the untold story of Muslims in China. The year is 651 AD. The air in the bustling markets of Guangzhou carries the scent of exotic spices, silk, and rare goods from distant lands. Arab and Persian traders from the Umayyad dynasty have made their way into China through the Silk Road, eager to establish trade relations. Among them is a special envoy sent by the Caliph himself, Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, a companion of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. His mission? To bring Islam to China. History tells us that Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas and his companions were welcomed by Emperor Gaozong of the Tang dynasty, who allowed them to establish a place of worship. This led to the construction of the Huaisheng Mosque in Guangzhou, believed to be the first mosque in China. From here, Islam slowly took root, mingling with local customs, languages, and traditions. The Silk Road was not just a path for trade, but also a bridge for cultural and religious exchanges. With every caravan that traveled back and forth, Islam spread and communities began to grow. Over the centuries, Islam flourished under different Chinese dynasties, shaping the identities of various ethnic groups. Fast forward to today, and China is home to approximately 18 million Muslims, primarily from 10 ethnic minority groups. The two largest are the Hui and the Uyghurs. While both groups share the same faith, their experiences in China are vastly different. The Hui, largely assimilated into Han Chinese culture, speak Mandarin, adopt Chinese names, and blend into mainstream society. Their mosques resemble traditional Chinese temples, and their relationship with the government is relatively stable. In contrast, the Uyghurs, a Turkic ethnic group residing in Xinjiang, have a distinct language, culture, and identity. This difference has placed them under intense scrutiny and control. Imagine waking up one morning to find that your mosque has been demolished, your cultural festivals banned, and your religious practices criminalized. This is the harsh reality for Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang. Under the guise of countering extremism, the Chinese government has implemented policies that restrict religious freedom, from banning fasting during Ramadan to forcing Uyghur Muslims to send proof that they are eating during the day. The stark contrast in how these two Muslim communities are treated speaks volumes about China's religious policies. While the Hui Muslims can practice their faith with relative freedom, Uyghurs find themselves monitored, detained, and sometimes even sent to so-called re-education camps. These camps, officially labeled as vocational education and training centers by the Chinese government, are anything but places of learning. Eyewitness accounts and leaked documents reveal that these facilities operate as high-security detention centers where Uyghurs undergo forced indoctrination. Detainees report being subjected to psychological pressure, forced denunciations of their faith, and even physical abuse. Satellite imagery has uncovered the rapid expansion of these facilities, with some estimates suggesting that over 1 million Uyghur Muslims have been held in these camps. Families are torn apart, with children placed in state-run boarding schools designed to erase their cultural and religious identity. Beyond the camps, Uyghurs living outside of detention face constant surveillance. Advanced facial recognition technology, police checkpoints, and mandatory phone monitoring apps create an atmosphere of fear and control. Even something as simple as having a Quran at home or greeting someone with As-salamu alaykum can raise suspicion. Meanwhile, international pressure continues to mount. Human rights organizations and foreign governments have condemned China's actions, labeling them as crimes against humanity. Some have gone further, accusing the Chinese government of committing genocide against the Uyghur population. However, China remains steadfast in its denial, insisting that its policies are necessary for maintaining stability and combating extremism. This dire situation raises a critical question. What does the future hold for Muslims in China? Can they preserve their faith and identity under such intense restrictions, or will the government's policies succeed in erasing their traditions over time? Beyond Xinjiang, The broader Muslim population in China faces other forms of challenges. While Islam has had a presence in the country for over 1,000 years, the government's increasing push for Sinicization, a policy aimed at making religious practices conform to Chinese socialist values, has placed further restrictions on Muslims. Mosques across China are being redesigned to fit traditional Chinese architecture. Arabic calligraphy is being removed from buildings, and Islamic teachings are being altered to align with state-approved narratives. The Grand Mosque of Shadian, which once stood as a symbol of Arab-style Islamic architecture, has had its dome and minarets removed, a symbolic erasure of its origins. But it doesn't stop there. In regions with historically significant Islamic communities, mosques have been outright demolished or repurposed. Some have been converted into cultural centers, libraries, or even commercial spaces, effectively erasing their religious function. In provinces like Ningxia and Gansu, where large Hui Muslim populations reside, authorities have cracked down on Islamic education, forcing schools to adopt a state-mandated curriculum that removes religious teachings. For many Muslims, these changes signify a systematic attempt to strip Islam of its unique identity in China. The government claims that these measures are part of an effort to integrate religious communities into mainstream Chinese society, but for many, it feels more like an erasure of their spiritual heritage. The destruction of Islamic landmarks has not gone unnoticed. International rights groups have raised concerns about the erasure of Islamic architecture, seeing it as part of a broader pattern of religious suppression. Despite growing international criticism, China continues to enforce strict controls on religious expression, ensuring that all faiths, including Islam, conform to the state's vision of a unified national identity. China's leadership presents a paradox when it comes to religion. On one hand, it promotes religious freedom on paper, allowing Islam to exist within the boundaries of the law. On the other hand, it enforces strict regulations that suppress religious expression, particularly among the Uyghur population. The international community has raised concerns, with organizations accusing the Chinese government of human rights violations and even genocide. But China continues to push back against these claims, maintaining that its actions are meant to curb extremism and promote national unity. So, where does this leave the future of Islam in China? Will it continue to thrive despite the mounting restrictions, or will it fade under government control? The answer isn't simple, but one thing is certain. Muslims in China have a history of resilience, and their faith has withstood centuries of change. The history of Islam in China is marked by periods of both peaceful coexistence and occasional conflict. During the Ming dynasty, Muslims continued to play important roles in society, serving as officials, scholars, and merchants. The construction of mosques, like the Great Mosque of Xi'an, further demonstrates the integration of Islam into Chinese architecture and urban spaces. However, there were also periods of tension. The Ming dynasty implemented policies aimed at assimilating minority groups, including Muslims. These policies sometimes led to restrictions on Islamic practices and dress. Despite these challenges, Islam continued to thrive in China. Migration also played a crucial role in shaping the Chinese Muslim community. During the Yuan dynasty, founded by Kublai Khan, large numbers of Muslims from Central Asia migrated to China. These migrants, often skilled soldiers, administrators, or artisans, contributed to the growth and development of the Yuan Empire. China is home to a diverse Muslim population, with the Hui and Uyghur communities being the most prominent. The Hui, dispersed throughout the country, are the largest group. They are largely integrated into Chinese society, often indistinguishable in appearance and language from their Han Chinese counterparts. The Uyghurs, primarily concentrated in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region in northwest China, are a Turkic-speaking group with their own distinct language and culture. They have a strong sense of their own identity and have historically enjoyed a degree of autonomy within China. While both groups share the Islamic faith, their experiences and challenges differ significantly. The Hui, due to their integration and geographical spread, have generally faced less persecution than the Uyghurs. The Uyghurs, on the other hand, have become the target of increasingly repressive policies by the Chinese government. A time of shadows, Uyghur Muslims under pressure. In recent years, the Uyghur Muslim community in Xinjiang has faced unprecedented levels of surveillance and repression at the hands of the Chinese government. Citing concerns about separatism and terrorism, the Chinese government has implemented a series of draconian measures that have severely restricted the religious, cultural, and social freedoms of the Uyghur people. One of the most alarming aspects of this crackdown has been the establishment of mass internment camps, euphemistically referred to by the Chinese government as vocational education and training centers. These camps, estimated to hold over 1 million Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities, are characterized by forced labor, political indoctrination, and widespread human rights abuses. Uyghurs in Xinjiang live under constant surveillance, with facial recognition technology, police checkpoints, and a pervasive network of informants monitoring their every move. The practice of Islam has been severely curtailed, with mosques closed, religious gatherings banned, and traditional Islamic practices outlawed. Hui Muslims, a different reality. In contrast to the Uyghurs, the Hui Muslim community in China has experienced a relatively greater degree of religious freedom. This is partly due to their integration into Chinese society, as well as their geographical dispersion throughout the country. However, even the Hui have not been completely immune to the Chinese government's growing restrictions on religious expression. While Hui Muslims have generally been allowed to practice their faith more openly than Uyghurs, they have also faced increasing pressure to conform to the Chinese government's vision of a Sinicized Islam. This has included restrictions on Islamic dress, limitations on religious education, and pressure to incorporate Chinese cultural elements into religious practices. Despite these challenges, the Hui community continues to maintain its distinct identity and practice its faith, albeit within the confines set by the Chinese government. Their experience highlights the complex and evolving relationship between Islam and the state in China. Sinicization, reshaping faith. The Chinese government's policies towards Islam are increasingly characterized by the concept of Sinicization. This policy aims to align religious beliefs and practices with Chinese culture and values, as defined by the Communist Party. In practice, this has translated into attempts to reinterpret Islamic teachings through a Chinese lens, and to promote a version of Islam that is subservient to the state. For Uyghur Muslims, Sinicization has taken a more coercive form, with attempts to eradicate their language, culture, and religious identity. The Chinese government views eager expressions of faith and cultural distinctness as threats to its authority and has sought to suppress them through mass internment, forced assimilation, and cultural erasure. The Sinicization of Islam in China raises concerns about religious freedom and the rights of minority groups to maintain their distinct identities. The Chinese government's efforts to control and reshape religious belief represent a challenge to the universal right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. The world reacts, a chorus of concern. The Chinese government's treatment of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang has drawn widespread international condemnation. Human rights organizations, governments, and international bodies have denounced the mass internment camps, forced labor, and other human rights abuses as crimes against humanity. The United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and the European Union have imposed sanctions on Chinese officials and entities implicated in the human rights abuses in Xinjiang. The United Nations has called for an independent investigation into the situation, but China has so far resisted these calls. The international community's response to the Uyghur crisis has been met with defiance from the Chinese government. China maintains that its actions in Xinjiang are necessary to combat terrorism and separatism, and has accused foreign governments of interfering in its internal affairs. The path ahead. Islam in China's future. The future of Islam in China remains uncertain. The Chinese government's policies of Sinicization and repression have created a climate of fear and uncertainty for many Muslims, particularly Uyghurs. The international community's condemnation of China's actions has done little to deter the government's crackdown. Despite the challenges they face, Muslims in China continue to practice their faith and maintain their cultural traditions. The resilience of the Islamic faith in China is a testament to its enduring appeal and the deep roots it has established in Chinese society over centuries. The future of Islam in China will depend on a complex interplay of factors, including the Chinese government's policies, the response of the international community, and the resilience of the Muslim community itself. With that said,